Perfection. We all want to be perfect, or to at least have the things that we work on, the things we pour our heart and soul into, to be without flaws. When it's not, we either set it aside and forget about it, or we try even harder. But like the folks in Plato's cave, what we strive for is often unreachable. The world of perfection or of perfect forms, say the perfect circle or the perfect image of a horse, that's all forever separate from us. Our attempts are like shadow play on a wall. Okay, and yes, I am getting a little bit philosophical here, but there's a reason for it. I ran across an essay about orthogenesis recently. I've talked about the concept on a show before, but orthogenesis is the hypothesis that life has an innate tendency to evolve in a unilinear fashion due to some driving force. Now, according to this idea, evolution is directed and purposeful, with organisms evolving in a straight line towards a predetermined, perfect goal. Evolution by natural selection doesn't work that way. It acts on genetic variation, without any inherent direction or end goal. Over time, populations adapt to their environments, leading to changes that may seem improved or maybe even a bit more complex, but this doesn't mean they are moving towards an ultimate form of perfection. Evolution is about adaptation to changing environments, not progression towards an ultimate goal. Now, I'm saying these words to you, but I first wrote these ideas down as I typically do when I prepare for a show. Writing it's complex. Of all the animals on this planet, we are the only species with the ability to convey ideas with symbols and characters. Now that has to mean something, right? If an orthogenetic force is, say, driving our evolution toward the perfect being, the fact that we can write to share thoughts and dreams with generations yet to come in our own words, well, that's surely the product of this driving force, correct? Well, of course it's not. I could dedicate an entire series of episodes on the flaws that point to imperfection in evolution when it comes to our very own species. Instead, I'm going to dedicate just this episode and focus on just one feature of our species that isn't evidence of perfection as much as we might like it to be. It's more a byproduct of an imperfect design that was formed by stops and starts. And that byproduct is something I love to do. It's writing and reading.
There is grandeur in this view of life.
Welcome to Evolution Talk with Rick Coast, an introduction to the oldest story ever told.
It's believed that the ability to write may have developed independently more than once in our ancient past, at least 4 times that we're currently aware of. The oldest civilization to exhibit this skill are the ancient Mesopotamians, who lived where modern-day Iraq, Kuwait, Turkey, and Syria are. And that was about 5,000 years ago. Also, around the same time, the Egyptians began to write their ideas down, or more appropriately, to pass on their ideas by etching them into stone. A little over 3,000 years ago, writing appeared in China, and then again, 2,500 years ago in Mesoamerica, where Central America is today. And those first attempts to capture one's thoughts outside of oneself, well, they're amazing to see. It started with simple pictures and glyphs. At first, they directly referenced objects seen in the outside world, like trees and, say, a tiger to convey danger, or to celebrate a successful hunt. From there, the pictures became a little bit more advanced and began to express concepts such as joy, sadness, and death. They captured the history, customs, and the biographical data of the culture. Think of those early forms of Egyptian hieroglyphics. They are some of the earliest attempts at storytelling. And one of my favorite examples of this is the tale of the shipwrecked sailor that was captured in a wonderful book on ancient texts by Egyptologist Toby Wilkinson. Now, this tale, told in hieroglyphics, tells of an island ruled over by a golden snake. And one day, a shipwrecked sailor finds himself trapped on the island with the snake. Hoping to boost the sailor's spirits, the snake says this.
I was here with my brothers and my children. We totaled 75 snakes. Then a star fell and they were consumed in flames. If you are brave and your heart is strong, you will embrace your children, you will kiss your wife, and you will see your house.
Simple, elegant, and timeless. As time went on, our ability to portray and share in pictures, symbols, and characters the things that we saw, felt, and dreamed about improved. But it wasn't for everyone, and that is to say, our ancestors had other things to worry about. Survival. Now, when your daily worries from birth to adulthood revolves around where to get your next meal or how to avoid being someone else's next meal, the last thing you had time for was learning how to write. Those luxuries were for those who didn't share those problems. You also have to remember, writing as a form of communication is a recent phenomenon. I've already mentioned it's only been around, as far as scholars can tell, for a little over 5,000 years. And those who practiced it and placed conventions around it were typically those who enjoyed a somewhat affluent status. And you may be wondering if it didn't exist in our very ancient past, but it does now, and in such a transformational way, doesn't that mean we evolved the ability to read and write? Let's look at what it means to read. It really does go without saying, but I'll say it anyway. The act of reading is an extremely complex process. At its base are some foundational abilities that need to be in place. One of those abilities is pattern recognition. One of the critical skills for reading is the ability to recognize patterns, especially visual ones. Humans have evolved a remarkable capability to recognize and remember visual patterns, which was essential for recognizing predators, prey, safe and even unsafe terrain, and many other survival-related tasks. When we read, we are essentially recognizing patterns in the form of letters and words. And then there is symbolic thinking. Our ancestors developed the ability to think symbolically long before the invention of writing. Early humans used symbolic thinking to create art, to create totems, and other cultural artifacts. Symbolic thinking also allows us to associate abstract concepts or ideas with physical objects or signs. When we read, we are interpreting symbols, letters, and words to derive meaning. Now, what else do you need? Well, you need tools and fine motor skills. The evolution of fine motor skills allowed early humans to craft tools, to weave, to paint, and perform other intricate tasks. Writing and, by extension, reading, would not be possible without the ability to make precise markings. Now, long before the invention of writing, humans evolved complex oral language capabilities as well. The capacity for language involves regions of the brain that process auditory signals, generate speech, and handle grammar and syntax. Memory evolution played a significant role in storing and recalling information, as well as narratives and lessons, which were initially passed down orally. The written word became a way to record and save and spread these oral traditions more reliably and, well, over longer distances. As human societies grew more complex, the need to record transactions, laws, stories, and knowledge, well, that all increased. The invention of writing systems responded to these very needs. With the spread of these writing systems, societies began to see the value in teaching their members to read. So the practice spread from person to person and culture to culture. While our brains didn't evolve specifically for reading, they are highly adaptable. Now, this plasticity allows regions of the brain that evolved for other functions like, say, visual processing and language comprehension. It allowed those other functions to adapt and handle the task of reading. Children, when taught to read at a young age, well, develop specific neural pathways that facilitate this skill. While we didn't evolve specifically to read, the cognitive tools required for reading are built upon a foundation of evolutionary adaptations that served other purposes. The relatively recent skill of written language provided the push for humans to apply these same tools to the task of reading. But As I stated at the top of the episode, nothing is perfect, especially when it comes to evolution, and especially when it comes to an acquired skill that involves such complicated cognitive processes as pattern recognition, symbolic thinking, fine motor skills, oral language, memory, social structures, and the brain plasticity I mentioned. Reading is not an evolved trait, and it has its challenges.
My name's Christopher Grunland, and I'm a dyslexic writer. While I grew up in a house full of books, reading never came easy to me. Fortunately, through family support and then later learning disability classes, it wasn't as much of a problem. It might seem strange for a dyslexic to want to write, but I think there are a lot of us out there who, because it didn't come easy, almost became obsessed with reading and writing. A lot of people think that dyslexia means that you just have a hard time reading and writing, but it's more of a processing issue. I might read a little bit slower than others, but that constant effort since childhood has paid off today. I make a living with words. I'm a technical writer, and I have a fiction podcast. That's the one that surprises me most because I'm terrible at reading out loud. And that goes to that processing issue. A line that most people could read or write quickly is an undertaking for me. I write in really clumsy chunks and eventually see it all come together. And when I narrate stories, I have to read sentences in broken pieces and sometimes do about a dozen takes. But after I finish a story, I really do imagine myself as that little kid looking up at all the bookcases in our house and thinking to myself, one day I want to do that. So I did.
Christopher's podcast, Not About Lumberjacks, is an amazing short story fiction podcast that I look forward to every time he releases an episode. The stories will make you smile, laugh, and even cry. They tackle the human condition in a world where one moment you are contemplating your childhood, and in the next you realize you're the only one left in a world where everyone has disappeared. His characters face, and sometimes overcome, the challenges that happen to be in front of them, but not always. Dyslexia, as Chris mentions, is a processing issue. It's the result of an imperfect path. It underscores humanity's imperfect journey through evolution. Yet, our very imperfections highlight our profound achievements, like Chris's. Despite evolutionary hurdles, Chris mastered reading, writing, and the artful conveyance of complex ideas, and he shares those in the form of stories that touch that human condition. In our relentless pursuit of knowledge, we've even birthed creations like, say, ChatGPT, echoing our innate drive to communicate and to connect. Our flaws also make our milestones all the more wonderful, reminding us that in imperfection, there lies beauty and potential beyond imagination. Our imaginations are somewhat like flower gardens.
What kind of garden do you come from?
Oh, I don't come from any garden.
Do you suppose she's a wildflower?
Oh, no, I'm not a wildflower.
Just what species, or shall we say genus, are you, my dear?
Well, I suppose you'd call me a genus, humanus, Alice.
Ever see an Alice with a blossom like that?
Come to think of it, did you ever see an Alice?
Yes. And did you notice her petals?
We may not be perfect, but we do have one thing going for us. We are perhaps the first species on this earth to embrace our imperfections and to use them to enhance, this amazing garden called Earth. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Evolution Talk. I'm Rick Coast, and I'd like to thank Dr. Mart Ottenheim for his essay, which inspired this very episode. If you find value in the show, please consider supporting it at evolutiontalk.com. I'd love to keep this show alive and do so without putting commercial ads in it. So share the show with your friends, tell people about it. And at evolutiontalk.com, you'll find more information, you'll find recommended books, and also ways to contact me. I'd love to hear from you. And I hope your week is going well, and until next time, please take care of yourself.
Evolution Talk is a Rick Coast production.